Late at night, the small diner glowed like a warm island in the middle of a cold, empty street. And Emma, the quiet waitress, moved between the tables with tired steps, yet with a calm smile that made people feel safe, even when she did not feel safe. Inside her own heart, the night shift was usually slow and simple, and Emma expected nothing strange, but everything changed when the bell above the door rang and a man stepped inside, with a look that did not belong in a peaceful place like this. Man was Adrian Cole, the famous billionaire that everyone saw on TV and in magazines, yet in this moment, he looked nothing like a powerful businessman, because his eyes were wide with fear and his hands were shaking as he held a crumpled piece of paper like it was the most important thing in the world. The customers froze and stared, and even the cook, who never cared about anyone outside his kitchen, took a step forward to look at the strange visitor. Adrian walked straight toward Emma, moving fast like he was running from something, and he spoke with a trembling voice that did not match his strong public image. He said he needed help. He said he needed her and only her. And Emma felt her stomach drop because she had no idea why a billionaire would come to her, a simple waitress who was trying to hide from her past. He asked if she recognized the symbols on the paper, and he pushed the note toward her with shaking hands, and the paper looked old and strange, and its markings were not like any language most people had ever seen. Emma felt her chest tighten because she did recognize it, and the fear on her face was so clear that Adrian stepped even closer and begged her to look again. She did not want to, but she reached out with slow fingers and touched the paper, and the moment her eyes locked onto the strange writing, she felt a painful rush of memories she had buried deep inside herself. The symbols were sharp and ancient, and she had sworn never to speak them again, and never to read them again, but here they were in her hands, and she could not escape them. Now Adrian saw her reaction, and desperation grew in his voice as he whispered that someone had left this paper inside his private office, inside his building that had the best security in the city, and no one should have been able to get inside. He said the note was placed on his desk without any trace of who left it, and he believed the message was a threat, and that someone powerful was after him. Emma wanted to drop the paper and run, but something held her still, and she kept staring at the symbols as if they were calling her name. She tried to hide the fear on her face, but she could not hide it from Adrian because he watched her with the eyes of a man who knew danger when he saw their heart beat loudly in her ears, and she remembered voices from her past, voices telling her that this language must never be shared with the outside world, and that using it would bring danger to everyone around her. She looked up at Adrian, and for a moment she saw not a billionaire, but a man who needed help and who did not understand the darkness behind the words he wanted her to read. Everyone in the diner watched in silence, as if they could feel the tension even if they did not know what was happening. The air felt heavier, and Emma could barely breathe as she forced herself to ask a question she never wanted to ask again. She whispered, asking Adrian where he got this message and why someone would leave it in his office. Adrian said he did not know, and that was why he came to her. He told her that he had shown the note to experts, but none of them could identify the symbols, and some even claimed the writing did not belong to any known language. But Adrian did not give up, because the moment he saw Emma in the diner earlier that week, he noticed the necklace. She wore a necklace with a small symbol that looked very similar to the ones on the note. He had not planned to approach her, but when the message appeared in his office, he realized the symbols matched her necklace, and he returned to find her, hoping she knew something he did not. Emma felt her blood run cold, because the necklace was the only thing she kept from her childhood, and she never expected anyone to recognize its meaning. She had worn it because it was the last memory of her family, not because she wanted the world to know who she really was. She stepped back and tried to breathe, but Adrian moved closer and begged again, insisting he was not trying to harm her and that he only wanted the truth. His voice was soft yet urgent. Emma could feel how scared he truly was. She looked around the diner at the faces staring at her, and then back at the note with its haunting symbols, and she knew her quiet life was over. Her hands trembled as she held the paper, and she whispered that the message was not meant for him but for her, and that if the writer had found him, then it meant they had already found her too. The part ends with Emma staring at Adrian, her voice barely a breath, as she says that whoever wrote this message is someone he should fear, and someone she has feared all her life. Emma stood frozen in the middle of the diner with the strange paper trembling between her fingers, and the world around her felt distant, like she was hearing everything underwater, and nothing made sense anymore, because the past she had tried to bury was now rising again, and she could no longer pretend she was safe. Adrian waited in front of her with desperate eyes, and he kept asking what the symbols meant, but Emma could not speak for a long moment, and the silence felt heavy, like a shadow crawling across the floor. Finally, she whispered that the message was not normal and not random, and not something an ordinary person should ever see, because this writing belonged to a language that was older than any country and older than most written history. Adrian leaned closer, trying to understand and trying to keep his fear under control, while the other customers pretended not to look, even though every eye was secretly watching. Emma took a shaky breath and read the first line, and her voice cracked as she translated the meaning of the words, which said that something or someone had returned, and that they were coming for what was taken from them. Adrian's face turned pale because the message sounded like a warning and a threat mixed together, and he asked Emma what exactly the writer wanted. But she shook her head and stepped back, like the memory itself was hurting her. She said the message was connected to people she once knew, people she never wanted to see again, and people who were dangerous in ways Adrian could not imagine. He asked her how she knew that, and Emma looked down at the strange symbols glowing slightly under the diner lights, and she whispered that she had studied this language long ago, when she was forced to learn it as a child. Adrian did not know what to say, because learning something that looked this old and rare did not sound like something a normal child would be trained to do. He wanted to ask more, but Emma quickly folded the paper and pressed it against her chest, like she feared someone might try to take it, and she walked toward the back door, asking Adrian to follow her so they could speak without everyone staring outside. The night air was cold, and the street was silent, and the yellow light from the diner windows fell across Emma's face, making her look both frightened and brave at the same time. Adrian stepped out behind her and waited for her to speak, because he knew she was fighting something inside herself, something she had never planned to reveal. She told him she once belonged to a hidden group of scholars who protected a collection of ancient languages that had strange powers when spoken and strange meanings when translated, and these languages were guarded from the world because the secrets inside them could change lives or destroy them. Adrian listened with confusion and awe, because he had never heard anything like this before, and he had met many strange people in his business life, but none of them carried the kind of fear that Emma carried now. Emma said she left the group years ago after something terrible happened, something that drove her away and made her hide in small places like this diner, where no one would find her. She had promised herself to never use the language again and never speak of it, but the message in Adrian's office meant someone from her past had found her, and they had chosen Adrian to get her attention. Adrian asked why they would target him and what he had to do with her past, and Emma hesitated before telling him that the writer of the message used a specific symbol that only a few people knew, and one of those people had a reason to hurt both her and anyone who stood near her. Adrian felt a shiver run down his back, because he suddenly understood he was in danger without even knowing the reason. Emma took another breath and slowly opened the paper again, and her voice shook as she translated the next part for him. It said that the lost one must return, and that time was running out, and that the Kinjivudi final key was still in her hands. Adrian asked what the key was, but Emma refused to explain and said she could not talk about it here, not in the open, and not without knowing who might be listening. She tried to hand the note back to him, but Adrian pushed it gently toward her and said she should keep it because she understood it better than anyone, and he believed she was the only person who could uncover the truth behind it. Emma's eyes filled with fear and confusion, because she never wanted to be part of this world again, and she had buried her old life. Deep inside her heart, hoping it would never surface, Adrian placed a hand on her shoulder and told her he needed her help because the message was left in the most secure room of his entire building. And if these people could get inside without being seen, then they could do far worse than leave a warning. Emma felt her knees weaken because she knew he was right. She whispered that the people who wrote this message were not simple criminals and not simple enemies, and that Adrian had stepped into something far bigger than he ever imagined. The danger was real and growing. The part ends as Emma looks at the sky above the empty street and says that if the message has reached him, then the past she feared most has already begun to rise again, and there is no going back now. The cold night wrapped around Emma and Adrian as they stood behind the diner, and the fear in Emma's eyes only grew stronger with each passing second, as if the shadows around them were waiting to hear every word she spoke. Adrian wanted answers, but he also saw how much pain this was causing her, and for a moment he wondered what kind of life Emma once lived and why she seemed so afraid of a simple piece of paper. But nothing about this was simple, and deep inside he knew it. Emma held the paper in both hands and her fingers shook as the symbols shimmered under the streetlight like old secrets rising from the dark corners of time. She whispered that she had hoped this day would never come, because she had spent years trying to hide and trying to become invisible, and now all of it was falling apart. Because someone had found her, and they were using Adrian to reach her. Her voice cracked as she said that her past was not something a person could forget even if they tried. Adrian asked her again what the message truly meant and why the words felt so heavy and dangerous, and Emma took a slow breath before she finally began to speak. She said she was not always a waitress, and she was not always an ordinary woman working quiet nights in a small diner. Before she came here, she lived inside a hidden community known only to a few people, a place where children were trained to read and speak ancient languages that most of the world believed were forgotten. These languages were not just old writing, they were keys to secrets that had to be protected from anyone who might misuse them. Emma said the group she belonged to was known simply as the Keepers, and they lived far from cities and far from normal life because their work was dangerous, and anyone who carried their knowledge became a target. The Keepers were guardians, not warriors, and their power came from understanding languages that held meaning beyond normal words. Some lines opened hidden doors, some lines carried warnings, some lines even affected the mind of the person hearing them. Adrian listened with disbelief, yet he knew Emma was not lying because the fear in her voice was too real. Emma explained that she was different from the others because she could understand the languages faster than anyone else. Even the elders. Her memory was sharp, and the symbols stayed inside her mind even when she tried to push them away. Some people in the group believed she was gifted, while others believed she was cursed, and that her skills would bring danger. One day Emma said she never believed them until the night everything changed. Adrian asked what happened, and Emma's eyes filled with the kind of sadness that made his chest tighten. She said there was a man in the Keepers named Marin who was once her teacher and someone she trusted like family. He was kind to her at first, but as she grew older, he became more interested in her abilities, and he began to push her to read texts that even the elders avoided. She refused many times, but Marin did not accept her answer, and he began searching for hidden writings on his own, hoping to unlock knowledge the elders kept sealed. One night, Marin disappeared from the community, and he took with him several ancient scrolls that were considered too dangerous to ever read. Emma was only a teenager at the time, but she remembered the panic in the village and the faces of the elders as they realized what Marin had stolen. Soon after he vanished, several fires broke out in nearby settlements, and symbols written in the ancient language were found on the walls. Emma said she knew then that Marin was using the knowledge for power, and he had become obsessed with unlocking more. Adrian interrupted, asking what Marin wanted from her, and Emma said Marin believed she was the key to unlocking the oldest language of all, a language known as the First Tongue, a language believed to hold the truth about an ancient source of power. She said the First Tongue was dangerous, and even hearing it could affect the mind, and that was why she ran away, leaving the community behind because she feared Marin would come for her. Adrian felt the weight of her words, and he finally understood why she worked in a small diner and why she avoided making friends or staying in one place. She was hiding from someone who wanted to use her abilities for something terrible. Emma looked down at the message again and pointed to a symbol near the corner. She said this symbol was Marin's mark, the sign he used to claim a message or a threat, and seeing it made her knees weaken because it meant Marin was close. Adrian felt anger rise in his chest because someone had dragged Emma into fear for years and now had dragged him into this danger too. Emma said Marin must have broken into Adrian's office because he wanted to send her a warning that he had found her again. She said the message claiming they had returned was not about a group of people but about Marin himself, because he always spoke as if he were many people at once. Adrian asked what they should do now, and Emma said there was no simple path because running might not save them anymore. She said they needed to find out why Marin was using Adrian and what he believed Adrian had that she did not. She said the paper mentioned something taken from them, and she feared that Marin believed Adrian was connected to the ancient treasure or key Marin had been hunting for years. The part ends as Emma looks at Adrian and says he is part of this now, not by choice, but by fate, and that Marin will not stop until he gets what he wants, and they must prepare for the danger that is coming. Next, the wind grew stronger on the empty street behind the diner, and Emma felt the cold settle deep inside her bones as she tried to understand why Marin would return after all these years, and why he would choose Adrian as the center of his plans. Adrian stood close beside her with worry on his face and confusion moving behind his eyes because he still did not know what Marin truly wanted, yet he knew the danger was real and closing in fast. Emma held the old paper tightly and whispered that they must leave this place before someone else arrived, because Marin never acted alone and he always watched from the shadows before he revealed himself. Adrian nodded and reached for her arm, telling her they should get to his car, which was parked at the front of the diner, and maybe find a safer place to talk. But Emma hesitated because every instinct inside her warned her that Marin might be waiting nearby. Still, Adrian insisted they move because staying in the open felt even more dangerous, so Emma finally agreed, and they walked around the corner toward the diner entrance. But the moment they stepped onto the street, a dark car rolled slowly toward them with its headlights off, and the air turned heavy as Emma stopped walking and whispered that something was wrong. Adrian followed her gaze and felt his stomach twist because the car came to a silent stop right in front of them, and the back door opened without anyone stepping out at first. Then a tall figure emerged from the darkness, and his steps were slow, calm, and almost confident as he walked into the dim light of the street. Emma's breath caught in her throat because she knew that silhouette even before she saw the face. It was Marin, the man who had once been her mentor, the man who had taught her the oldest symbols, the man who had betrayed the keepers and destroyed everything she once knew. His eyes gleamed with cold curiosity as he smiled gently, as if he were greeting an old friend instead of the girl he once hunted. Adrian stepped in front of Emma without thinking, trying to shield her. Even though he had no idea what this man could do, Marin raised a hand as if to calm him and spoke in the ancient language with a soft voice that made the hairs on Adrian's neck stand up. Emma quickly told Adrian not to listen too closely because some lines in the ancient tongue could confuse the mind and twist a person's thoughts. Marin then switched to normal speech and said he had been looking for Emma for a long time, and that she had something that belonged to him, something she had taken years ago when she ran from the keepers. Emma shook her head and said she took nothing, but Marin only laughed and said she had taken the one thing he could not replace: her voice and her knowledge. He claimed that Emma was the final key to unlocking the first tongue, and that no other child learned as fast as she did. Adrian demanded to know why Marin had broken into his office and why he left the strange message. But Marin's smile faded and his eyes turned sharp. He said Adrian owned something that once belonged to an old collector who had connections to the keepers, and that this collector had hidden a fragment of an ancient tablet somewhere within Adrian's properties, without Adrian knowing. Marin believed that Emma and Adrian together could lead him to that fragment. Emma felt sick hearing this, because she never wanted to be part of Marin's plans again, and she never wanted anyone else to suffer because of him. She told Marin she would never help him and that she had left that life behind, but Marin stepped closer and said she no longer had a choice because running had only delayed the future, not changed it, as his words filled the air too of. Marin's men stepped out of the car and moved toward Emma and Adrian. Adrian tried to push Emma behind him again, but Emma raised her hand and said Marin should not come any closer. Her voice was shaking yet strong because she remembered every painful lesson he had taught her, and she remembered every warning from the elders about the danger of speaking certain lines. Marin tilted his head curiously and told her to prove she still remembered the old teachings. Emma narrowed her eyes and whispered a short phrase from a lesser-known dialect, and for a moment, the wind shifted and the streetlights flickered. As if reacting to her words, the two men hesitated, their steps slowing as they felt something strange in the air. Marin smirked and said that tricks like that would not save her forever, but Emma kept her ground. Adrian grabbed her arm and urged her to run because staying meant risking everything. Emma looked at him and then back at Marin, and she knew Adrian was right because Marin was only testing her now, and the real danger was still building. Suddenly, Emma and Adrian turned and sprinted toward the alley behind the diner while Marin shouted to his men to follow. Emma's heart raced as they ran through the narrow path with footsteps echoing behind them. Adrian led her toward his car parked farther down the block, and Emma kept glancing back, hoping the shadows were not gaining on them. When they reached the car, Adrian unlocked it with shaking hands, and they both jumped inside. Emma looked out the window and saw Marin standing under the streetlight, watching them leave with a calm smile that chilled her bones. She whispered that Marin would not stop now, and that this was only the beginning of something far more dangerous than either of them had imagined. The part ends as Adrian drives into the night while Emma clutches the paper and says that Marin's arrival means they must uncover every secret before he does, or they will both be destroyed by the past. She tried so hard to forget. The car sped through the dark streets as Emma held the ancient paper tightly. Adrian kept checking the mirrors because he feared Marin might appear behind them at any moment. Emma felt the air growing colder even inside the moving car, and she whispered that Marin was not chasing them blindly. She said Marin always planned every step long before he showed his face, which made the danger even heavier than Adrian realized. Adrian asked where they should go now, since no place felt safe anymore, and Emma replied that they needed to reach the old storage site near the river, where she once hid things from her past. She believed Marin was after something connected to the first tongue, and she hoped the hidden items might help them understand why Adrian was involved. When they reached the river, Emma felt memories rushing back like shadows moving underwater, reminding her of nights spent hiding from Marin years ago. Adrian parked the car behind a broken wall, and Emma led him down a narrow path where the old storage building stood, almost forgotten by the world. Inside, the place smelled of dust and cold metal, and Emma moved toward a corner where several crates were pushed together like someone tried to hide them long ago. She knelt beside one crate and whispered a short line in the ancient language, and the lock clicked open with a soft sound. Adrian watched with wide eyes because he had never seen words open a lock before, and Emma explained that some languages carried power when spoken with the right voice. Inside the crate, Emma found a small stone tablet wrapped in cloth, and she lifted it carefully as if holding something alive. The tablet was carved with the same symbols found on the paper. Marin left in Adrian's office, which made Emma certain that Marin wanted this tablet, or the knowledge hidden inside it. She told Adrian that the tablet was part of a larger set, scattered across different regions, and she feared Marin believed Adrian unknowingly owned another piece. Before Emma could explain more, the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty building, and both of them froze as a group of Marin's men stepped inside, blocking the exit. Adrian grabbed Emma's hand and pulled her behind a crate while the men spread out searching for them with slow, careful steps. Emma whispered that they needed to stay quiet because the men might not know exactly where they were hiding. But one of the men kicked a crate aside, sending dust into the air, and spotted the corner where Emma and Adrian crouched. He shouted to the others, and they moved forward ready to grab Emma, but she stood up quickly and raised the stone tablet in both hands. She spoke a short, firm line of the ancient language, and a sudden gust of wind burst through the room, knocking the men backward as if an invisible force had pushed them. Adrian could barely believe what he saw, yet he grabbed Emma's arm and told her to run while the men tried to regain their balance. They ran toward a back door that Emma remembered from her past, a hidden exit she once used when Marin first began his search for forbidden knowledge. As they reached the door, more footsteps echoed from outside, and Emma knew Marin must be close because his men never acted alone unless he commanded it. Emma looked at Adrian and whispered that she needed to use the tablet again to slow them down, but Adrian shook his head, afraid the language might hurt her if she used it too much. Still, Emma lifted the tablet and traced her finger across the carved symbols, feeling a warmth move through her body like an old power waking up again. She spoke another ancient phrase, and the ground beneath the doorway trembled slightly, slowing the men approaching from outside while Adrian pulled her through the exit. They ran into the cold night, following the narrow path along the river, hoping to reach the car before Marin appeared from the shadows. Behind them, the sounds of shouting and rushing footsteps grew louder, and Emma felt fear pressing against her chest because she knew Marin would not stop until he had the knowledge he wanted. Adrian squeezed her hand and promised they would survive this together no matter how dark the path ahead became. Emma looked at him with trembling eyes, but she also felt something new inside her, a spark of courage that she had lost long ago. She whispered softly. Emma and Adrian ran along the dark river path with the cold wind pushing against them, and every sound behind them felt like a warning that Marin and his men were getting closer. With each step, the night was deep and heavy, yet the fear in Emma's chest kept her moving because she knew that if Marin caught them now, he would take the tablet and force her to read the first tongue, and she would never return to a normal life again. Adrian tightened his grip on her hand as they reached the far end of the river, where tall trees bent over the water, and the moonlight shimmered across the surface like a silent guide showing them the way forward. Emma looked back and saw shadows moving along the path, and she whispered that Marin was near, and they needed to hide before he reached them, because running alone would not save them anymore. Adrian pulled her toward a narrow space between two old boats lying upside down on the muddy ground, and they crouched together inside the small shelter created by the boats. Emma held the stone tablet close to her chest, and her breathing was uneven because she felt the tablet growing warmer as if reacting to Marin's presence and the danger closing in around them. Adrian whispered that they would find a way to stop Marin, but Emma shook her head softly and said Marin was not just a man, but a mind shaped by ancient power and a hunger that had grown for years. From their hiding place, they heard Marin's voice drifting over the river, carried by the wind like an echo from another world. He called Emma's name in the ancient language, and even though Emma told Adrian not to listen, she could feel the weight of every sound because Marin's voice carried commands and promises and lies all at once.